Today, I am thrilled to have a pioneering environmental economist and educator, Dr. Eban Goodstein, joining us on the HYSKY pod. Eban directs both the Center for Environmental Policy and the MBA in Sustainability at Bard College. He's renowned for his national educational initiatives that mobilize schools, universities, civic groups, and faith-based organizations across the country to engage deeply with climate change solutions. An author of impactful books and numerous articles, Eban has shaped the dialogue around sustainable economics and climate education for decades. His work, including founding the innovative Greenhouse Network and leading the groundbreaking Focus the Nation teach-ins, has inspired thousands to take action. At Bard College, he's also spearheaded the C2C Fellows Network, empowering the next generation of sustainability leaders. Eban, welcome to the HYSKY pod, and thank you for bringing your invaluable insights to our listeners today.
Well, Daniel, it's a pleasure to be here.
So I want to jump right in with a question. And by the way, Eban also was recently on TED Talk, a really good TED Talk that I've watched several times and I've learned a ton from. But the most interesting thing that I took away from that was that being arrested every 25 years is good for the soul. So tell me more. And there was a picture in that. Was that you?
That was me.
So tell me more. And there was a picture in that. Was that you?
That was me. That was me. Yeah, I mean, very timely, given all of the protests on campus these days, lots of kids getting arrested. Yeah, so that TED Talk is really about the 3 ways to change the future, and I'll get to the arrest question in just a minute, but there really are 3 ways to do that. At Bard, I run graduate programs that actually focus directly on all 3 of them. I'm a teacher. I'm an educator, so education is about changing minds. That's really important. But I also offer Masters of Science degrees in Environmental Policy, Climate Science and Policy at my program. And that's for people that want to change the rules, right? Get rid of bad laws and regulations, put in place good ones. And then finally, there's business, sustainable business. And people say, well, what's business even doing in the change the world kind of, but of course, that's what you work on all the time, right? Is how do we get aviation to change their approach and really change the game, right? So there's changing minds, that's education, changing the rules is policy, and changing the game is business. Because at the end of the day, no matter how many rules we change and minds we change, business has got to figure out how to get this done. How are we going to fly people around the planet without destroying the climate control system of the entire Earth, right? That
Exactly.
Business has got to figure that out. So yeah, in terms of getting arrested, I grew up in South Central Tennessee in the 60s. And so that was a time of inspiration, right, from the civil rights movement. And of course, that's, but the tradition of civil disobedience in the US goes back, to the abolitionists, or actually goes back to the Tea Party.
Yeah.
And the Boston Tea Party, right, with those guys throwing tea into the ocean and presumably getting arrested for it. But it was a good lesson for me. It was actually in 2012 was the last time I got arrested. And it was actually the most effective civil disobedience I'd ever been involved in, because 10,000 people gathered around the White House and gave it a big hug, trying to influence Obama to delay the Keystone pipeline. And about 1,000 of us got arrested the next day. And then the next day, Obama actually did it. We actually got what we asked for. So it can be, it's a tool. It's definitely and it's also good to do that every once in a while, just to remind yourself about the kind of commitment that has been necessary to really shape the future in the past. And I don't consider myself primarily an activist, but it's good to stretch those muscles every once in a while.
Yeah, that's so valuable. And it's funny because I've listened to the TED Talk 3 times now, and I didn't even catch that the first 2 times. I caught it this morning. I was rewatching again to see, like, was there anything in there that I missed? How did I miss that? I don't know. But, it's it's interesting how everything just and seems to be so interconnected, because I also don't consider myself an activist. Sometimes like life circumstances sort of force us into those roles. And I certainly never saw myself as an entrepreneur. I was somebody that kind of naturally like bucked authority and was like,
Mhm.
wait, why are you doing that? Like, if I can understand why and it makes sense, then I'll go along with it. But if I can't understand it or make sense of it, then I'm not going to do it. And speaking of other things that are in the news, related to aviation, curious to get your take. Um, my old employer was in the news because I'm an aerospace engineer by training, worked in
Mhm.
manufacturing, and we built the two 737s that went down in 2019. Yeah. I've been on both of those aircraft. We didn't build the software, but we built the structures, the airframe. I was a stress engineer. I was also doing my master's in sustainable aviation, and it became clear to me really quickly that traditional aerospace engineering didn't know anything about sustainability, period. Forget about, the environment and these sorts of things. So I was like, I'm going to have to do something else. And so I was advising my advisors, and it became frustrating. I was like,
Mhm.
Danielle, this is a business. And I sure as hell didn't think I would ever be running a nonprofit. But the two 737s went down, and I'm in this phase where I'm like, this is not what I signed up for. I thought I was going to be, sending rockets to the moon. And here I am involved in these crazy cover ups, and it doesn't feel good at all. And, 300 and some people have died, and we're not doing anything about the emissions. And like, there's got to be a better way. So I end up starting a business, not knowing anything about what I was doing. I did it. And so just recently, in the past couple of weeks, my old employer was in the news for having a whistleblower come out who is unfortunately no longer with us. And so I'm just going to say for you and our listeners that I'm happy and healthy. And I'm not planning on going anywhere anytime soon. I'm also not testifying in front of Congress. But, things like that, they tend to make entrepreneurs out of us, And
Yeah.
so I've been digging into the programs at Bard, and the things that you all are offering are unlike anything that I've seen anywhere else. So can you tell me a little bit more about that? And for somebody maybe that's a traditional engineer and that feels, maybe not satisfied in their role, or how they can make a difference and change the world, like you said. Tell me about some of the programs that are there, and I might want to do one of them too.
Okay, well, you'd be welcome to, and our MBA in particular is well suited to people that live all over the United States. But yeah, so the program that's probably of most interest to your listeners is the MBA in sustainability. Um, and it's one of the few programs in the world that fully integrates a focus on mission-driven business and sustainability into a core MBA. So we teach marketing, strategy, finance, accounting, operations, all that stuff. But in every course, we're thinking about how do you use those tools to build a business that's actually in business to solve some big social or environmental problem. Got to make money, of course. If there's no margin, there's no mission. Whether you're no for-profit or nonprofit, you got to cover the bills.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, how do you really put mission or sustainability first and then have financial success follow? So that's really what's at the core of what we do. And the traditional MBAs are not about that. They're really about a single bottom line, make as much money as you can without breaking too many laws kind of business. And that's really, as you say, what's got us into the messes that we're in with plane crashes and unsustainable air travel. Um, but let's flip that, right? And think about how you can actually make money making the world a better place. And we started the program in 2012. We're now officially the #1 green MBA in the US, the last 3 years running. Princeton
Nice.
Review's #2 for nonprofit management. And we're actually ranked #4 worldwide as the Better World MBA. So we've made money doing good in the world. But that's really what the strategy is about. A lot of the conventional business has moved in this direction the last 12, 15 years with CEOs embracing purpose because people don't want to show up, to make money for a company. That's not
They
why
don't.
people want to go to work. So, so we're really taking it seriously and say, what does that mean? How do you really, move beyond hypocrisy and greenwashing and really engage around this? And it's been exciting. It's been a great run.
That's amazing. And you said something in that TED talk as well about like if you said you can design your business, you can um design out. And it made me think of this McKinsey and Company paper that I read, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago about the importance of diversity in the workplace and how it has to start at the top, like from the
Mhm.
board. You can't expect
Yeah.
it to come from the bottom up. And you were saying, like, those companies will outcompete their
Yes.
competitors. And so, as somebody coming out of legacy aviation
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
having very little experience running a company, let alone a nonprofit, didn't even know what a nonprofit was. But saying, okay, I'm going to trust this data and we're going to do things this way. We are competing and out competing legacy aviation, which has way more money than we've ever seen and way more power, but people are naturally gravitating to it. I also think, it's sort of like a time where people are seeking meaning and
Yes.
truth. Yeah, we can pay our bills, but with so much negativity in what we're exposed to in the media and on social media, that it's like we need to feel like we have a purpose.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? And like, how does that shape like one people, like you said, people don't want to go to work for somebody else. And I've seen
Yeah.
that. I'm one of them.
Well, there's a lot there. So getting back to the designing out, right? So, the basic hypothesis behind sustainable business and the MBA in sustainability is that you can actually design out waste and pollution and exploitation from businesses and build businesses that are, steadily reducing their environmental footprint and steadily figuring out how to make these places better places for people to work. So, and also, addressing communities and suppliers and the whole value chain in with respect and equity and justice, right? So you can kind of envision companies taking the high road and actually doing better than companies that are trying to exploit nature and exploit people. And on the environmental side, my friend Elisa Hammond, who used to be sustainable director at Cliff Bar, likes to say that businesses need to think like a tree. All right. How does that mean? Well, trees, they get all of their energy from the sun directly, right? They photosynthesize, no fossil fuels. And trees are circular economies, right? There's no waste or pollution that comes from a tree. They drop their leaves every year, but that's food for other critters and the soil. Um, and so they're fully circular, and they're also regenerative. So trees not only don't create pollution, they actually enrich the world around them. They cool the environment, they create habitat for other critters, they enrich the soil. So that's a metaphor for kind of the ways in which business can think about operating circularity, renewable energy. And of course, these are ways that you can also make money if you do it right. Um, and then on the social side, right, this is really where sustainability has been going, starting out with kind of human rights in the supply chain and Nike and soccer balls, 90 mid 90s, Nike was on the hook for child labor in their factories around soccer balls, and they embraced that and they said, okay, we're going to take responsibility for our supply chain, we're going to build an ethical brand around supply chain, and it's turned into huge business success, right? But by them doing that. And the whole diversity and inclusion issue, I mean, it's just idiotic that this is getting outlawed, right? We're moving into a world that in America, where workforces are already majority minority. And America is great because of its diversity. You can run a homogeneous company like Samsung, Korea is not a very diverse place and that's great, but America is not like that. So we have got to figure out how we can take advantage of that diversity to drive creativity, innovation, talent retention, talent attraction. That all happens, but you got to do it right, and you got to respect it, and you got to actually work at it. It doesn't just happen. And a great example of a company that, in my mind, that was doing the right thing on the environment, but has imploded because it ignored kind of the social side, is Tesla,
Mm,
right?
mm.
You
I
know,
was
here's a
just
company
about
that,
to bring up Tesla.
yeah, I mean, completely revolutionized the whole approach to, made electric vehicles sexy, right? Had a great brand in that space. But because it
Cobalt.
is paying no attention to its people whatsoever, and in
Yeah.
fact, firing 500 people who built a successful business line in charging just like that with an email,
Yeah.
just, you know, it's just the company is, not to mention the sort of, antics of the CEO in terms of alienating people, it's just destroying the value. It's destroying the company completely. So you've got to have both sides. You got to have a commitment both to environmental sustainability and inclusion, engagement. I mean, that's a big part of the profitability story here, is you're creating a place where people want to show up and work,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And that's, and my friend, first I'll say a great example of a company that checks all the boxes for me is United Therapeutics. Great leadership from the top, social aspects, very sensitive about the climate. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the company, but I would
I'm not.
definitely, look at them, and they would be like a great example of doing things the right way. I have so many questions I want to ask you, but the first thing that came to mind about Tesla and EVs in general is, you know, how do we, this is something I struggle with. You talked about like the climate anxiety scale and 1 to 10, and I kind of fluctuate. And it's because I came out of manufacturing as an engineer, and I've seen like the really yucky, dirty side of like what it takes to build an aircraft. And I
Yeah.
imagine a battery and all of these things in automotive are the same way, and manufacturing is nasty. Um, seeing the exploitations of human rights in the Congo, um, and then also living in a capitalist society where we need cheaper prices. How do we navigate that? How do we navigate that? And how do you, as like an empath, which I am, like, how do you do that ethically? And
Yeah.
then like everything, there's like a bad side to this, and like this is being exposed and that, and that can be a lot to manage,
It is. Yeah. Well, you asked these really big questions.
I do.
And the first thing I'll tell you is we are going to go through an electric vehicle revolution, and it is going to happen fast. The Chinese are building $11,000 electric vehicles, right? And they're nice. They're good cars. Um, that is future is here now.
Yeah.
Right now, we can put up barriers that we're not going to accept Chinese stuff, but they'll build them in Mexico, or the Mexicans will build. This is coming, right?
Yeah.
Unless we're going to shut off our borders completely.
Yeah.
Um, so this is the future. The car industry gets it. That's why they're on board with this transition. They didn't try to stop it. I'm not sure they're going to manage it. We'll see. It's going to be really disruptive, but that is the direction we're going in. And the good thing about it is that it's inherently a circular economy, right? If you think about their current, petroleum-based, transportation system, you go mine a bunch of oil, you transport it halfway around the world, you burn it in a car, it goes into the air, and then you start over and you mine a bunch of oil. It's just a completely linear system.
Yeah.
Take, make, waste. Okay. With batteries, you mine a bunch of lithium, right? And then you make it into batteries and you put it in cars. And then once those batteries are dead, you take them out and recycle them because the metals are still good and valuable, right? So you have to have an initial kind of ramp up where you're transitioning and you're doing a bunch of mining, right, of lithium and, cobalt, and we'll get to that in a minute. But at the same time, you're going to be ramping down the mining of oil, right? And in terms of just volume, it's like a fraction of
Hmm.
the amount of stuff you need to extract from the earth to build out an electric vehicle and batteries, utility scale and electricity storage system, as opposed to what you have to pull out of the ground to burn on a daily basis to get the
Right.
same amount of energy. So that's a good news story, right? Is that we're moving towards a fundamentally circular and more ecologically sound kind of system. Now, in the interim, you got to build a bunch of new mines, and you got to worry about things like slavery in the supply chain. Um, and, uh, and and so that's why you need public pressure and people getting arrested and, you know, forcing attention so that companies can't really get away with that. On the cobalt issue in particular, I think we're going to be moving to sodium batteries and away from cobalt, because you know they generate such heat. The lithium cobalt batteries generate so much heat.
Mhm.
So I think that's going to be a technology shift away from cobalt. Um, so yeah, but it's a good thing. And you know, young people in particular, my students are like, they're always looking, well, you know, what about all that mining you have to do for this and that? And I go, you know, there's 8 billion people on the planet. There's going to be 9 and there's going to be 10. You can't supply them with the things they need to have a decent life without doing some mining, you know? And so that it's just naive to think otherwise, right?
Well, I guess, how do we do that without exploiting people and children? That's the
Yeah, I
thing,
mean, consumers have to put pressure on companies
Yeah.
and force them to clean up their supply chains.
Well, and then, and this kind of goes where my anxiety is that um making those kinds of choices, like say, okay, I'm not going to purchase this vehicle, I'll purchase this one instead, is a privilege also, right?
Of course.
Because some people can't afford that. Some people can
Yep.
only afford just like fast fashion, the whole it's pretty much anything that's cheap. It seems like, and this is where my anxiety comes in, is like my climate anxiety is that just in the scope of manufacturing, when things are priced really well, there's usually it seems like some form of exploitation along that supply chain. And having the knowledge and the privilege to make those educated decisions, I'd like to see personally, some innovation take place in that space. Is that something that you guys talk about at
Of
Bard
course.
College? What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, one is, I mean, you also need to change the rules. I mean, you need policy. You know, you got to have laws against importing stuff that's made by children or in slave conditions.
Yeah,
So that's got to be part of the mix. But you can also do business model innovation to try and get around that that sort of inherent connection between, you know, affordability and bad for people and the environment kind of
right.
thing. In the fashion space, there's a lot of people trying to figure this one out, but rent the runway type
Yep.
models of
Yep.
clothing as a service
Yep.
instead of something. And the reality is fashion is a consumption good. It's a privileged good, right? I mean, the average garment is worn, I think, 7 times before it's disposed. So this isn't really about people are too poor to afford clothes. It's like people they're basically, and it's a good thing, right? Fashion is a good thing. I don't have a problem with fashion.
Right.
You
Right.
know, it's a creative expression of humans. You know, we love figuring out how to adorn ourselves, right? Even
Yep.
people like me who are dressed in, green. Um, but
Or a t-shirt
but
that was $1 on the clearance rack from
yeah,
Walmart.
there you go. But so there's ways that you can get around this. And it's also about education, right? So you got to have business models that shift, you got to have policy change, and then you just have to educate people about the actual impact
Yeah.
of buying cheap stuff.
Yeah.
I've got a book on my shelf, The History of the World in 7 Cheap Things.
I have that
Um,
book.
yep,
Yes, that's a fantastic book.
yep.
You bring me to another point, which is a topic that I am absolutely fascinated by, which is social engineering or like propaganda for good.
Mhm.
Where, there's a certain, even though, yes, we could all agree that fashion is a privilege, it's not a necessity. We all have pretty much in the United States, most people have what they need. I see, there's clothes, donate boxes, everywhere, thrift stores, garage sales, pretty much everybody is clothed here. Um, but there's a certain sort of quota if you're, going to college or going to get a degree, if you're going to a job interview. And I think this is why the younger people are kind of embracing me personally. I mean, I'm not that young. I'm a grandkid. I know you're a fellow I'm a grandparent. I know you're a fellow grandparent. But for me, this is sort of something I've been deconstructing, where I used to put a ton of effort into my appearance before public speaking, or doing an interview. And anymore, I'm just like, t-shirt's good. And that's hard, right? And that's also a privilege, because like, okay, they know who I am. It doesn't really matter. But if they don't know who I am, they might treat me a little different, because they're like, who is this person off the streets? And there's like a certain stigma. So I would love to see like society just embrace, like, yes, we want to be clean and have good hygiene, but just wear whatever you want and be accepted, whatever that looks like. I think could go really far in sort of breaking down some of those supply chains. Yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, culture change is complicated and hard to get your hands around, right? So, I mean, for example, we were just doing some remodeling at the house, and I got a giant rack of things that no one is ever going to wear again, which are called neckties. Um, and I've got a bunch of suits that will never be worn, not because I'm too fat. Oh, that may be part of that too, but these are things that have just, I'm literally, the necktie has disappeared as a thing. I used to be on the board of a company that ran college bookstores, and when this was in 2009, and I would go to board meetings in a suit and tie. By 2018 or 19, when I got off the board, those ties were gone, the suits were gone. So it's interesting to see how these things shift. But it's always the case that people are going to be pursuing status through fashion.
Yeah.
We're hardwired by that. We're
Yeah.
animals. We like to stand out. We gain status, and so people will show. The Met Gala, whatever. All those
Yep.
people in those dresses, whatever. So there's no getting away from it. I think it's just one thing you can do, of course, is to make sustainability fashionable. And a lot of people try.
Yeah.
Patagonia, for example, has done a pretty good job. The one I like to point to is organic food.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's a market that just didn't exist a dozen years ago, and now it's the fastest growing, or plant-based. That stuff is really taking off. So figuring out how, and Tesla, another example of sort of a company that succeeded in making a technology that was better for the planet to be
Cool.
cool, at least for a significant number of consumers,
Sure.
to kind of get the ball rolling. So that's part of it. Impossible Foods just did a rebrand, to appeal to meat lovers. So there is this whole really interesting side of marketing for good,
Yep.
which is an important skill set.
Do you eat plant-based?
I do. I love it. Actually, Burger King is now a destination fast food restaurant for me, because
Yep.
they have Impossible
Yep.
Whoppers there, which I
Yep.
actually like better than the meat version.
Yep.
Um, so I mean, I'm still a carnivore, or omnivore. I'll eat pretty much anything. But I'm cognizant of beef being, a big problem, undoubtedly, for the planet. Um, but this is not going to be solved by Eban Goodstein eating fewer steaks.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's important that Eban Goodstein eat fewer steaks, as a way to kind of help other people, model what I'm doing. But at the end of the day, this is a thing that will be solved by business or government, or more broadly through education.
Yeah. And I want to come back to your three ways to change the world. It's
Yeah.
educate, change minds, and then it's change the rules,
Yep.
and then it's change the game.
Yep.
And I kind of want to ask you about your nonprofit that,
Mhm.
first of all, very impressive that you were sponsored by Nike and other large companies. It sounded amazing. I'm in the nonprofit space.
Yeah.
I know how hard it is to make money. It does come down to the bottom line. You have to, but people are interested. what advice would you give to a person that is running a nonprofit that's now 15 months old,
Mhm.
and that we're barely in the green, but we'd like to take it further. What lessons did you have?
Mm.
Um, I would love to pick your brain on the topic of this.
Yeah.
I never thought I'd be in the nonprofit space, but here I am, and learning tons every day. So that definitely stuck out to me as something interesting.
Well, I mean, you need a funding model that works. I mean, that's the key to nonprofit success. You can have a great idea that's going to change the world, but if you don't have a reliable source of income, then you can't talk about it. So I'm going to tell your audience about the business idea that I ran, which I still think is a great idea, and someone should pick it up and literally run with it. So
Maybe
in
we will.
2000, we started the race to stop global warming,
Yep.
which was going to be like a race for the cure, right? And the vision was tens of thousands of people out on the streets with race to stop global warming t-shirts. And the idea was to raise awareness, educate people about the real race to stop global warming, obviously. But also we envisioned it as a sustainable business model that could scale, right? That this would be all over the world and it would be self-financing through um, subscription, from people paying race fees and then sponsorship. And we almost made it happen. We did it for 3 years. In year three, we were running in the Central Park in New York, and the Loop in Chicago, and Presidio in San Francisco, and Denver, and Boston, and Seattle. But we never quite got enough runners. We'd get like 700 instead of 750,
Mm.
and then after a while, we were getting big enough that 10% was getting to be significant. So we had to shut it down. I still think it's a great model, and part of me thinks that I should have stayed with it, and if I had done that, I would have had more impact on stopping climate change than starting a business school. But I don't know. But
It-
that was a fork in my life, which I feel bad having abandoned. Um, but it was an entrepreneurial thing, and I really would have had to go all in, like, and risk a lot, and I
yeah.
did. So, but yeah, I think one piece of advice is, yeah, if you're going to start a nonprofit, before you go into all the energy, you really have to figure out where is the money going to come from, and be realistic about your ability to get grants, those sorts of things. But try it. I mean, there's really nothing more exciting in life than to try and start your own business or your own nonprofit. You just learn so much.
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
you said so many things that I want to
yeah.
touch on. Thank you, first of all, for sharing that and being vulnerable. I'll share a similar story. In my previous life, prior to engineering, I was in music. I was a rapper. I was signed to a record label, and then I was at this point where I was like, I'm not really making any money, and I worked on it for 10 years. And we were kind of having like a rapper beef with me and this other girl. And I was like, I don't really like this. It just seems stupid and negative, and I don't really want to do it anymore. And I was just working so hard. I mean, people don't realize how much work it takes to put out an
Mhm.
album. And I had put out five. And the year after I quit, the girl I was competing with went and got signed to a major label, got a huge deal and everything. And I said to myself, Danielle, if you're ever feeling like you're gonna quit again, next time just don't quit. So I'm really grateful for that experience, but also I'm in a space now, my daughter's grown. Um, my husband passed away. No need to feel sorry. I'm okay. I've moved on from that. But I'm kind of in the space where, like, I don't really have anything to lose. I was unhappy
Mhm.
at my job. I had some money of my own that I could invest into it. And I was like, I don't like where I'm at in life. I don't like sitting in this cubicle. Um, Everybody around me is doing well. Like, I can literally risk it all. And I did, and it's been scary, but it's now we're in year. So I pivoted to nonprofit space about 15 months ago, but before that, I was building a hydrogen powered aircraft and learned a lot and actually flew, but then was like, okay, we're going to pivot into this nonprofit space. And I know that I'm onto something, and I'm not going to give up. And we're still figuring out where the money comes from, and we're surprised every
Mhm.
day, but we learn a little bit more. And I feel like education, yes, is so key. And I'm interested in a lot of your programs, but also there's like a part, I'm curious what you think on this. There's like a part, I feel like, of running a business and entrepreneurship that as my algebra teacher used to say, you got to put your pencil to the paper. And it's like, you just got to go out there and fall on your ass, or you're not going to learn it, you know? What are your thoughts on that? Like, how much of that can you get from education, and how much do you have to get from real world experience?
Well, I mean, education and entrepreneurship, the best education tries to simulate, to the extent possible, the experience of running a company. And somebody ought to have on your show is my entrepreneurship professor, Alejandro Crawford. And he's built some educational software called Rebel Base that we use. And we actually teach this around the world. We have a global classroom where there's students from Bangladesh and Kyrgyzstan and Lithuania and Palestine and Colombia, and they're all in one class on a Monday morning. And they're actually all developing business ideas and business models. And then once a week, they go into classrooms in their own universities, but they build their business models online and they critique them. And then at the end, they pitch them in this $1,500 like Shark Tank for sustainability. We do that in our MBA a couple times as well. So you can take people through the process of building a business, and there is a science to that, you know, and sort of the pieces you need to get to sort of develop your pitch deck. And we do that, and we think it's so important that we actually make our MBA students do it twice.
Nice.
Because that innovation, that kind of radical imagination is the only way that we're going to see our way through.
Yeah.
Right? In a sustainable way. There's no way we can meet the needs of 9 or 10 billion people on this planet, essentially without moving it towards radical circularity.
I love that. Radical circularity. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, we really have to figure out how to move away from take, make, waste to truly circular systems where all waste from one production process is food for another. And we're really moving in that kind of direction, which is why I like the electric car revolution so much, because ultimately it's powered by the sun, and then the industrial infrastructure is circular.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And you know, and this is for your listeners, you know, that see this, this is a hydrogen aviation. HYSKY is a hydrogen aviation. We're basically decarbonizing aviation with hydrogen. So what does that mean? It's basically what, you know, Tesla and others have done with automotive, but it needs to happen in aviation. Why does it matter? Because we all fly. We fly. We don't all fly, but many of us in the United States fly. And it's sort of like something we don't think about. We'll drive our Tesla or Uber in a Tesla to the airport and then get on an aircraft that emits like 10 times more than we would if we were driving a fossil fuel car per passenger. And so it's something, you know, we've seen Europe really be ahead of the game on. China is actually working on it. Japan, South Korea, and the United States has really lagged behind where aviation is going. And I was learning about this when I was doing my master's in aviation. I was like, well, if we're not going to teach this in the United States, if I can't learn this in the United States, then we're going to create it. We're going to do it in the United States. And so that's what we're doing. And so, you know, why it matters to you, if you fly on an airplane, it matters, you know? And so we're working on ways to kind of bring that more into fruition. But it's all connected. We can learn from automotive. We can learn, you know, something that I've seen firsthand is that aviation as it is not sustainable. And I'm not just talking about environmentally, I'm talking about business model wise. Just it's one of the most stressful experiences to go to an airport. You know, even with your TSA pre-check and your clubs, and it's anxious. You don't know what somebody's going to do on their flight. You don't know if you're going to be late. You don't know if you're going to make it on time. And, you know, if I can drive there in 3 hours or less, I'm going to. So, you know, these are things that kind of plague us, and aviation is growing exponentially. People are wanting to use aviation more, and we don't really have a way to support it, not to mention the emissions, and then not to mention aircrafts falling out of the sky and doors flying off and whistleblowers coming up missing. So we've got a real problem here, and there aren't very many people in the United States looking at this. So we're kind of, you know, lone wolves in a sort of scary space. But, maybe we'll be arrested around the White House one day or around a Boeing facility. So that's, kind of why it's important to me is that I don't look for people that are innovating in aviation. I look for people that are innovating in sustainability, that are passionate about the climate, that are, brave enough to get arrested or brave enough to say the hard thing out loud or brave enough to change the world. And which is why I wanted to have you on this podcast, because you've got a lot of wisdom in this space. And frankly, we don't have it in aviation. And, I was one of, few alone that were like, we can do this better. And so I'm looking for other people that have done that in other spaces.
Well, I've got some questions for you about that. But let me just say, yeah, I mean, I have an enormous carbon footprint because my wife is Korean. And so we're going to go see her family every couple of years. I've got 2 grandbabies and 1 on the way. I live in New York. They live in Texas, New Mexico, and California. And I'm going to go see them.
Yeah.
Right? That's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so, I can moan all I want about people driving SUVs and eating steak, but at the end of the day, my carbon footprint is just enormous.
You gotta see your loved ones.
So we've got to, yeah. So we've got to get that one taken care of. Yeah. So I'm curious, is the vision, solar to fuels kind of thing? You make hydrogen out of, really cheap solar electricity, and then that's the fuel you're going to use in the plane?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. So remember I mentioned earlier that we were a for-profit and then we pivoted into the nonprofit space. So when we were for-profit, we were building an actually plane powered by hydrogen fuel cells. Guess what our biggest challenge with that is? Because a lot of people think, oh, the Hindenburg. By the way, tons of aircraft flew before the Hindenburg and after. Hydrogen did not cause that to explode. That's a whole other talk I have. You can Google that. There's documentaries, lots of propaganda there. You can imagine who was behind that. But we proved that we could fly safely with hydrogen. Guess what our biggest challenge was? Other than money and it being expensive,
what was it?
It was where to get the hydrogen.
Oh, okay. Oh, so yeah, I guess I was going to guess that, right? So yeah, there's but that's coming online, right? I mean, people are talking about green hydrogen everywhere. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's the most abundant molecule in the universe. You can make it out of water, but where we were building and flying, we didn't have it. So we considered, should we make our own hydrogen? Because we were having to drive 3 hours to get a tank of hydrogen to do our flight test. You can't buy it off of Amazon. You can't buy it at Walmart. You can't buy it at your local gas station. So it was a major time sink for us, which became very, very expensive. And it basically sunk our business model. It stopped everything we were doing. Like, we can't meet these deadlines to get this aircraft certified and do these tests because we can't get the hydrogen fast enough. So that led me to think, and there are a few other companies that are working on hydrogen aviation. We said, I wonder if our competitors are having the same problem. And so we hosted this, non-competitive, like pre-competitive meeting just to kind of have like this little chat. This is what we're experiencing. Are you guys having this problem? It turns out we all were. So we started started out as just like a little council where we kind of a working group where we would talk about how to get hydrogen. And then I had this epiphany, like, what if we started helping other aviation companies get hydrogen? And what if we help the hydrogen people? So that's what we did. And so we go around, we change minds, we educate airports on the opportunities coming. We educate the OEMs that are building the hydrogen aircraft on where they can get their fuel cells. A lot of them come from China, like you mentioned. There are some US companies, but they're more expensive and harder to get. So we're basically just building this ecosystem, which starts with, and yes, we want it to be clean hydrogen. So it's going to be hydrogen made from renewables. So that's, your wind or whatever, by splitting water molecules. And then how do you get that hydrogen from A to B? How do you get it from where it's produced to where you're going to use it? Are you making it there, or how do you get it there, and how to make that as cheap and sustainable as possible? Yeah. And then how it's stored. And then how it's used on board the aircraft, and how all of that. And it's literally a circle. And I never even heard the term circular. What did you say? A circular business model?
Circular economy.
Circular economy. I've never even heard that term, but that's exactly what I saw in my mind. And we have a circle diagram where it has the production, the aircraft, and it anyway. So that's kind of cool because, like, I feel like I'm kind of in your brain with that vision. But yeah, So we don't actually build the technology or make the hydrogen. We connect and educate people to each other that are, and we host events and things like that.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, this is coming because, batteries are a relatively short-term storage technology, right?
Yep.
You produce electricity from solar power, you charge batteries, and that can get you through, 12 to 24 to 48-hour cycles.
Yep.
But if you're going to be in places where the sun's not going to shine for a week, or like Iceland for
Yep.
6 months, then you need to have some kind of renewable long-term storage. And you can, basically it's called solar to fuels, and you
Yep.
can use solar electricity to produce hydrogen as well as liquid fuels. So
Yep.
there's this is another piece of the climate energy revolution that's on its way.
I'm sorry even for the background noise if you hear it. I swear I'm thinking you're like the weather jinx for me because there's thunder and lightning. It was literally sunshine when we started, and now I hear thunder and lightning. I hope we don't get
No,
disconnected, but we're
I don't
about to
hear
have
it.
another storm.
Right.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. My vision started with aviation. How can we be more sustainable in the sky? Which made me kind of peel back where we're getting power, how we're doing that, which led me to hydrogen fuel cells and hydrogen engines. And then I learned the difference between, the hydrogen rainbow. And then I learned, oh, hydrogen is actually energy storage, which I remember from thermodynamics and engineering, but I hadn't thought of it that way. Like hydrogen can store the energy used to charge EVs and our homes and all of these sorts of things. So I fully believe hydrogen is the future. And I'm personally, super excited to see the funding that's going into hydrogen. I'm not sure if you're aware of the Inflation Reduction Act and like the $8-9 billion going into
Sure.
the hydrogen hubs in the United States. So, we're, closely working with all of those hubs and looking at, what role aviation plays. And another thing a lot of people don't know is a lot of airports. I mean, we have hundreds of regional airports. When we think airport, unless we're a pilot, when we think airport, we typically think DFW, LAX, and all the spacing on the one in New York. Is it JFK?
JFK, LaGuardia,
Yeah,
Newark.
LaGuardia. That was the one I was thinking. Yeah. And so we think those, but there are hundreds of underutilized airports in the US we call regional airports. And so unless you're like a private pilot, people just don't know about them. There are hundreds that are just sitting there desperate for business innovation, and we need them. We need them, and they have lots of land, typically lots of land. And so why not take our knowledge, let's make some hydrogen there. We can sort of prove out this. They can also be, charging ports for the EVs. So that's kind of our vision, is that eventually we'll power the aircraft, but there's so much we can do. And a lot of these airports happen to be in areas that are really starving for EV charging. I thought I'm a poet and I didn't know it. But yeah, so that's kind of our vision. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Solar to fuel, is that what you called it?
Yeah, solar fuels. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
that's not a term I usually use, but
can I ask you another question?
of course.
So, I mean, I always see, like you go in the airport, like United, it's like, oh, we're so sustainable, we're investing more in fuels. What is it, biofuels, or what's
Okay.
the greenwashing element here?
Okay, so that's a fantastic question, and I kind of did a eye roll. But what I should say is, so I will say, United Airlines is invested in Zero Avia, which is the leading hydrogen fuel cell aircraft OEM right now. So they've pre-purchased vehicles. They're one of the few. I'm pretty sure it's United. If it's not United, I'll put something on the screen to correct me. I'm pretty sure it was United that has pre-purchased. So they're very much funding what Zero Avia, a company that's zero emissions, powered by hydrogen fuel cell. I'm gonna pre-purchase those, and they've flown and everything. We work with them often and support them. So, we believe, HYSKY believes, that hydrogen fuel cells or hydrogen engines are the future of aviation. But there's a precursor, because we don't have the ability right now to say, we're going to come into DFW and pull out all your infrastructure and put in hydrogen, right? This train, it doesn't stop. It keeps moving. You can't just stop the entire business. A grounded airplane is a money sink. Those airplanes need to be flying and they need to be refueling. So what is a early adopter, a way to reduce emissions, but it's the net zero kind of thing. Okay. So there's what we have is, now this is confusing. So I hope I don't bore you to death with our last 8 minutes, but we have what we call SAFs, sustainable aviation fuels. Now, based on what I told you about hydrogen, you would assume that hydrogen is considered a sustainable aviation fuel, correct? This is
Yes.
where so much confusion, even within the industry, is. Sustainable aviation fuel, even though technically hydrogen is a sustainable aviation fuel, SAFs mean like biofuels.
Yeah.
They're
Things you can burn in
drop-in
a
fuels,
conventional engine. Yeah.
carbon sequestration, all of that. And hydrogen used to be considered a SAF, but there was some lobbying involved, and hydrogen got kicked out of that definition. So now we're on our own, even though hydrogen is truly the most sustainable, the only sustainable one. But there's a good part to this. We can use SAF right now and we can drop it in. And what's the good part? Well, right now, green hydrogen is very, very expensive. But hydrogen is used as a feedstock to produce SAF. So SAFs can use hydrogen. SAFs can be made using hydrogen and help bring down the cost of hydrogen, which will help us get closer to being able to compete with jet fuel. And then when that happens, it's game over. And every airline will tell you this, like, if you can give me hydrogen that I can afford, we'll buy those aircraft right now. So that's what we're working on. So there's a lobbying aspect for it. There's, a technical aspect, and then letting people know that we don't want to, we meaning hydrogen, the hydrogen folks don't want to compete with the SAF folks. We believe that SAF is a step to get to hydrogen. SAF is not SAF, meaning sustainable aviation fuel, and it's confusing, but SAF is a necessary step to get to hydrogen powered aviation.
Yeah. So, I mean, we got 4 minutes. So one could just burn the hydrogen fuel in a plane, but instead you're choosing to run it through a fuel cell to produce electricity to run the engines. And you
It
say,
depends.
are there like commercial scale aircraft that can run on fuel cells now?
Yeah, absolutely. Zero Avia is one of them. And so it's a depends. I often tell people, and I'm so happy you differentiated between, I always say there's 2 ways you can use hydrogen. You can burn it, and it's not electric, obviously, because you're burning it, or you can run it through a fuel cell, which is electric, which a lot of people don't like to say a hydrogen fuel cell is electric, but it's providing electricity. So it's electric. Depending on what you want to do and what kind of aircraft you're operating, you might need a hydrogen engine, or you might be able to get by with the hydrogen fuel cell. For like 20 passengers and under. And then we also have like flying cars and air taxis coming online. And yes, they're real. I'm talking to a guy last night that owns one and is flying in a flying car right now. And we'll do a demo of that in Las Vegas. So you're invited to come see that. By the way, I'd love to see you there. It's we have a lot of fun. But yeah, depending on what you want to do. So if it's like, say you want to do a 737, what we typically fly on, our Airbus A320, that would likely be a hydrogen engine. Or if you're wanting to do like an international flight, that's going to be burning. You're going to get more power out of that. But if you're like 20 passengers and under, a hydrogen fuel cell will do the job.
Cool. Interesting.
Yep. Yep. And either one is way better than SAF and way, way better than jet fuel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I hope I've gotten you excited or bored you to death with aviation. And, I'm always open to come talk to anybody, if you ever have any students or anybody that's interested in aviation. I'm not like technically a teacher, but I am by just naturally. And I love working with students and getting people excited about flying cars, air taxis. We'll be able to, want me to blow your mind real quick?
Sure.
Look up, have you heard about Uber Elevate?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, you have? Okay.
Yeah.
So you've seen, so what do you think about the flying cars, flying taxi space?
It's probably coming. It'll be interesting. And yeah, kind of wonder about crashes, people bumping into each other. What are the lanes? All those things. Lots of interesting questions to sort out.
Okay. So I'll ease your mind on a couple of things. So they're definitely coming. They're definitely here. It will probably be 2030 before it's mainstream. That's my prediction. Other people predict, much earlier. But we won't fly. Sorry, I should have turned that off. We won't fly them ourselves. They will essentially be, and my colleagues would be angry at me for using this term, but I like it because people get it. There'll be like giant drones that we're passengers in. So they will be programmed, pre-programmed, like we put the destination in, it will have the flap and it will have the flight path in it, and they will talk to each other. The aircraft
Yeah.
will talk to each other, so they won't bump into each other. And we've proven that technology at my college. Oklahoma State did that. Lots of colleges are proving that, where they can talk to each other and operate very similar to, how insects operate in the sky.
Yep.
So, that's coming, and the regional airports will play a big role. So I hope I
Cool.
can get you excited about flying taxis. And I should say, yeah, flying taxis is probably a better analogy than flying cars.
All right. Well, sign me up. I'll definitely take it for a test ride.
Okay, I'm gonna mark you down as a willing customer. Eben, thank you so much for being here. What would you closing thoughts, what would you tell
Oops.
your younger self if you could go back
Hmm.
30, 40 years? I don't know how old you are, but I think 30, 40, or however many years you want. What would you tell your most struggling age self? What would you tell your younger self?
That's a good question. Uh, yeah, I think you're probably right. Just don't give up. If you're onto something good, just see it through.
Yeah,
That's probably the same advice we were talking about earlier.
yeah, yeah. Cool. Well, it's really been a pleasure. I look forward to us meeting in person, and you're officially invited to Las Vegas in September. I'll send you that information.
Great.
And yeah, thank you again. I can't wait to learn more about Bard College, and maybe I'll revive your dream and you can restart it via me, because I've been thinking about doing a race. So interesting that you brought that up.
Yes, well, I'll give you the logos and all the IP. We'll just turn it right over to you. I'd love to see
Oh, I
that thing
love it.
happen. So yeah,
Cool.
good. Well, Daniel, great to speak with you, and good luck with the work you're doing. It's important.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Eben. Have a fantastic weekend, and we'll talk soon.